Hello and welcome back to part 13 of the CardRPG Scriptable Object tutorial for Unity. My name is Krasenstein and we are working today on the Effects Manager. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to make a new script inside the Managers folder. Right click, create C# script, call it Effects Manager. We're going to right click in the hierarchy and create a new empty object. Make sure the position is at 000 and hit F2 to change its name to Effects Manager. Drag this into the Managers group and we can open this script after we attach the Effects Manager to the object. Let's open the script. Just out of habit, I like to still remove start and update, and I'll add it when I'm ready to add it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make this an instance. Public static effects manager instance. So we're going to set up the instance now, so it'll be private void awake, open brackets. If instance is not null and instance is not equal to this, destroy this.gameObject, return. Otherwise, instance is now equal to this. We're going to now set up some variables in the script. We're going to do public, we're going to set up some effect datas, which are the scriptable objects for different effects. We're going to call them vulnerable. Do another one, an effect data called weak. Another effect data called frail. And the last one called might. That way we can drop in all that information and have it work for us. We are now going to need a dictionary, so public dictionary, and it's going to be status effects, effect data, call it status dictionary, status DICT, equals a new, and hit enter to autofill the dictionary information. We're also going to need at some point a game object, which is a status prefab, a transform, public transform of player status container, and another transform of enemy status container, and another game object of an enemy status prefab. We'll put a header right here, so a bracket header. We'll call this display. If we go back into Unity, we'll see that on the Effects Manager, things will populate. And now we have stuff to add, and we have stuff in display that we can't add yet. We don't actually have that in the game yet. So we can go into the effects part of Scriptable Objects and attach frail into frail, might into might, vulnerable into vulnerable, and weak into weak. Let's go back into the script. You can just double click right here. We're going to make a start method now. So we're going to do private void start. And do one, first off, make sure the dictionary is clear when this is loaded, just as a check. Now we're going to do 4 status dictionary adds. We're going to add status effects dot vulnerable and vulnerable. So now you have an easy way to reference it. Status dictionary dot add weak with weak. Status dictionary dot add frail with frail. And status dictionary dot add might with might. We're going to now add a reference to this dictionary so we can quick grab a scriptable object. So we'll do public effect data. We'll call this get status effect. And it has to call in, we're going to pass in a status effect, S, and open brackets, and we're going to do return status dictionary S. That way we are able to call effects manager.getStatusEffect, and it will return this dictionary. So now that we're able to get status effects, we need to now be able to add the effects to our system. And so let's do that. So we're going to do a public void. We'll do create status. We'll call in a status effect and call it effect. We also need to check whether it's an enemy or not. So bool, we'll call it is enemy. So now we'll do if is enemy, and we'll do game object G equals instantiate enemy status prefab into enemy status container, which we will set those up. We need to also do an else. So if it's not an enemy, we have game object G equals instantiate status prefab player status container. We're going to go over to the status prefab, hit Control and R twice, and change the name of it to player status prefab. That way it's a little bit more clear. We will add in the UI, or what this UI does soon. We just need to make these in order to for everything to make sense. Another method called public void remove status. And that's going to call a game object. Game object G. And all this is going to really do, at least for now, is just going to destroy G. Public void update UI status container. And we'll go fill that in when we have more information. So now we need to go into the combat manager, and we have to add a couple new variables to the combat manager as well. So underneath the current health, we will need to do a public list of status effects. That's current status effects equals a new list of the same, and another list of integer called current status effect lengths equals a new list of its. Alright, so let's scroll to the bottom and add in a new method in the combat manager called public void add effect. And that would be status effects effect and an int length. That way, effectively, when we add a card, we can just call combat manager.add effect, and it will do everything it needs to do to populate for this effect. This is for when the player gets afflicted by weak, or they play a card that gives them extra might, so they have more damage. We can do an if not current status effects dot contains. So this is saying does not contain the current effect. So effects manager dot instance dot add effect, which we don't have yet. Current turn dot player comma effect. Current status effects lengths dot add for the length, and then effects manager dot instance create status effect false, not enemy. We will go and add effect in shortly. Else, so this is if they currently are weak or currently are frail, right? An enemy attacked us and we currently have vulnerable. Then we're just going to do a for loop. We're going to loop through current status effects dot count, enter, and if current status effects I equals effect current status effects length I, so the same spot in the list, and we're going to add length, so plus equals length. After that, at the end of the else statement, we're going to add effects manager instance update UI status container. Now we need to go into the effects manager and add in the add effect method. Public void add effect. We're going to pass in current turn affected and status effect effect. We'll call it switch tab unaffected. Hit enter. Remove default. On player turn. So if we add effect and it's based on it's the player that the effect's being added to is combat manager.instance current status effects add effect. The enemy turn will have combat manager instance current enemy current status effects, which we don't have yet. Add and effect. So now we need to go into the enemy script. So if you already have it open up here, you can hit Control, comma, type enemy, and enter. The enemy's add effect script works very similar to the combat manager's add effect script for the player. It's going to be public void add effect that calls in a status effect called effect and an integer of length. Basically, how long is this effect lasting for? How many turns? So we have to go to the top for enemy and add a couple variables. We'll have a public list of status effects called current status effects. Pretty familiar, right? Equals a new list of status effects. Another list of integers called current status effect lengths equals a new list of integers. And a transform of enemy status effects container. Now let's scroll back down to the bottom to add effect, and we have if the exclamation mark for not, so current status effects that does not contain effect. Then we do effects manager instance add effect. It's going to ask us for what turn it is. This is the enemy's turn. And what effect it is just effect. Current status effect length dot add length effects manager dot instance create status effect true. So now we know that is an enemy because that requires to check whether it's an enemy or not. So now else here means that the enemy currently is affected by this effect. We'll run a for loop, for tab, and hit tab once to skip over the I. Length will be current status effects dot count. Then if current status effects I equals effect, current status effect lengths I plus equals length. And of course, update UI status container, which we don't have yet, so we're going to be adding that in. So we can click it once, hit control period, hit enter, and we'll add in, it'll do this thing up top, which is annoying. And we'll add in throw new not implemented exception. We want to get rid of that. I'm going to change this to actually a public call, just in case we need to reference it outside. And we're going to do inside this update, we're going to do if current status effects dot count is 0. We're just going to return out of it. We don't need to do anything. We'll add more to this method when we have the game object for the statuses. But we do also need to do another public void reduce status effects on new turn. So first we need to do a for loop, for tab through current status effects dot count, and do current status effects length I minus minus, so reduce the number that it is, right? And now we need to do one more for loop. It needs to be a reverse for loop. So we have for with an extra R, tab, hit tab once, it's current status effect lengths dot count, hit enter. If current status effect lengths I is less than or equal to 0, then we do effects manager dot instance remove status. This is going to ask us for a game object. So it would be effects manager instance enemy status container get child I dot the object. We need to then call current status effects lengths dot remove at and position I and current status effects dot remove at position I, and of course update status container, update UI status container. That's all the stuff that gets added to the enemy for this. We can go back into Effects Manager, and inside Update UI Status Container, we can do if Combat Manager instance current status effects dot count is equal to 0, return, and then we'll have other stuff that happens here. We're now going to go make the status game object that we're going to be using as a prefab. Let's go back to Unity. So inside the game UI, we're going to right-click Create Empty, and it's going to be called the Status Effects Container. We're going to mark the anchor. So I'll hold Shift, and you want to hit left align. I'm going to click F on it so we can see where it is. We're going to actually change this to right align, so hold Shift to top right corner align. It's going to go up here is where the status effects are going to be for the player. So the spots will actually be -26 for X, -9.5 for Y. The width is going to be 1,240, and the height's going to be 130. We're going to add in a horizontal layout group that has an extra padding of 10 on the left side and a spacing of 12.5. We'll make sure that width is not marked on force expand so that they can actually line up. So now inside these, we're going to make a new empty. This empty object is going to be called player status. This will be the prefab that we're working with. It will have an image and a new script on it called status. So we're going to go into the main part of scripts. We're going to right click here, create C# script status. We're going to make sure after it compiles that we can add status onto here on the player status and open status up. Status is quite some info. So we're going to delete start and update. Do public effect data. So basically what we're going to do with this is we're going to drop an effect data into here when it gets created. And then this will populate the rest of the fields. So we have a public string effect name. We have a public sprite effect sprite. We have a text area 510. Remember that was making a bigger text box so you can see everything. We have a public string effect description. We have a public float of effect strength. This is everything that we set up in the effect data. We just need to make sure that everything is now passed in and readable. We have a public status effect type. We have a public integer of turns left. So we know how many turns are left on the status effect. We have 3 text objects that need referencing. So using Unity engine.ui, we have a public text status text, a public text called title text, and another one called description text, DESC text. Private void start. And we'll do a thing called load trinket info from data. We'll hit Control and period to make that available. And it's all this is going to do is pass in all the information it needs to pass in. So it'll be effect name equals effect data dot name, right, dot effect name, effect sprite, effect sprite equals effect data effect data dot sprite effect description equals effect data dot description. Effect type equals effect data dot type, and effect strength equals effect data dot effect strength. Then we need to call a get component image dot sprite equals effect sprite, and then status text dot text equals turns left dot toString. Title text dot text equals effect name dot toUpper. We want to make sure it's capital letters. And description text dot text equals effect description. So that's the entire status script. That's all it is. It's just basically a data script. Let's go back to Unity. We don't need to pre-fill this stuff. We just need to pre-fill the rest of these text objects. So inside status, we have a new UI. So right click, new UI text. It's called text, it's fine. We'll give it a number of 99, and it's actually 15 in X and negative 42.5 in Y. 82 width by 30. And it's 20 font size. Right align bottom. We'll actually do a best fit here of 2 to 40. Make sure it fits good. We'll make it bright white. And we'll give it an outline. So add component outline of a distance of 2 and negative 2. So now you can kind of see that we have a text object that'll show us how many turns left. We also need right click on player status, a UI panel. This will be the information when we hover over it. So the panel will be actually negative 56, 132 for top, so that was left and top. Right is negative 87, and bottom is negative 174. The background here we're going to change to black. The low opacity is fine. Inside this panel, we're gonna rename this panel info panel. We're gonna have 2 text objects in here. So we're gonna do a UI text. We're gonna call it title. This is just called status for now, capital letters. We're gonna hit best fit from 10 to 40. We're gonna do for the color, we'll do FF F800. And we'll do centered center, and that's going to sit. We're actually going to hold shift and click this bottom right one right here, which stretches to all. We're going to make this 8.7, 6.7. The top right is going to be 11.6 and 86 for bottom. We're going to duplicate the title. We're just going to call it text or info text. Info text. Change these numbers up here to top's going to be 54 and right is going to be the same. Bottom is going to be 6.7. Change this back to white. We'll do top middle or left middle, and we will call this you take 50% more damage. So let's sync up the player status object. Text here goes into status text. We have the title text, and then we have the info text going into description text. We can now make player status a prefab. We're going to go into the prefab section, drag player status in. Now we can delete it from the hierarchy. Inside the effects manager, it does have a couple spots we need. So the status effects container for player is right here. The player status prefab is right there. All right, so let's now go back into the effects manager script and add in where the UI was unable to be attached before. In the create status script, we are going to have g.getComponent status dot effect data equals get status effect of effect. Another g.getComponent status dot turns left equals combat manager dot instance dot current enemy dot current status effects length in position of combat manager dot instance current enemy dot current status effects length dot count -1. Hey, whichever one you just put on there, this is how long it's going to be up there for. Else, so the player g.getComponent status dot effect data equals get status effect of effect. g.getComponent status again dot turns left equals combat manager instance current status effect length position combat manager instance current status effects length dot count -1. In UI status container or update UI status container, we can now do a for loop, a reverse for loop, so for with 2 R's, tab, hit tab once, make it combat manager instance current status effects dot count -1. We're going to do player status container dot get child I, so get child I dot get component status dot status text equals combat manager instance current status effects length I dot toString. So that will now show that number. Let's go to the enemy script. I don't see it up here, so control comma enemy into the update UI status container of the enemy. We need to go through here and do another, and also do a for loop, a reverse for loop, 2 R's, tab. We do current status effects dot count, and we're basically going through them and checking to see if effect manager instance enemy status container get child I dot get component status that status text equals current status effects length I dot toString dot toString. And that concludes the entire effects manager system. It seems to be very, very in-depth. There's a lot to it, but it makes it very, very streamlined and simple when we need to make different effects actually trigger on players or enemies. Tune in next time where we'll be going into the trinkets manager and adding more trinkets in, finishing out the enemy status effects prefab and syncing all that up. So if you guys liked the video, definitely hit the like button. If you really like it, hit the subscribe button. It means a lot. We are going to be making these tutorials until we finish this prototype / game. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.